Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the Developmentally Speaking brand.
Today, my guest is the greatest man that ever lived, A double, Mr. Austin Aries. Austin, how are you, sir?
Thanks, man. I still chuckle every time somebody addresses me like that. But yeah, good to be here. How are you doing?
Good, I can't complain. So I'm going to ask you a question that you've probably been asked a million times. What made you want to get into professional wrestling?
Beats a real job. That's what I always say. Um, I think I was about 4 or 5 years old when I first saw wrestling on TV, the old AWA, and it just kind of captivated me. Um, I never really thought about being a pro wrestler. I wouldn't have even known how to do that back then. This is pre-internet days. You couldn't just Google everything. But I did grow up an athlete. Grew up playing sports, baseball, predominantly, and that was kind of the path I was on. Tried doing the college thing for a couple of years, playing baseball, and realized it wasn't a fit for me. And um, and then it just wrestling found me. A childhood friend of mine called me up, told me he was training in Minneapolis with Eddie Sharkey, and I knew that name from he trained the Road Warriors and a lot of other guys that came out of Minnesota. So I went to check out the school, which was a small ring set up in a garage. And from the moment I saw these guys in the ring, I just said, well, first of all, I was like, holy cow, this is real. And that was it. I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I moved up on my buddy's couch a week or two later and started to pursue my dream.
What? How old were you at this time?
I would have been let's see, 22 when I got in.
hmm
Yeah.
Was it everything you thought it'd be? Starting out training?
No, I don't think I knew what to expect, right? I
hmm
had no idea. Wrestling, late 90s, early 2000, I broke in 2000. There was still a bit of secrecy around it. It was still a bit of a protected industry that didn't just, peel the curtain back for everybody. So, I got a little bit of an old school mentality in my training, but, I was so excited for the prospects of getting to do this. I didn't care what I had to do as long as I got to go to camp those 3 days a week and get in that ring. So, I gave plasma, I worked temp jobs, I grinded and did whatever, and it never felt like work because I got to go then Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays and get in the ring and learn this,
hmm
and that was so amazing. And my only goal when I started this was one day when people ask me what I do for a living, I'm going to tell them I'm a professional wrestler, and that was my ultimate goal. And after about 4 years, I was able to accomplish that and quit all my side hustles of waiting tables and everything else I was doing, and make enough money to get by being a pro wrestler.
So how hard was it starting out back then after your training to like get some bookings? Did you stay in the area where you trained for a couple of years before you started branching out?
Yeah, it was basically, again, there was no social media, so it was a lot harder to network. It was
hmm
hard to kind of get your footage out there. We had to make VHS tapes and send them to promoters that we knew were never going to watch them unless it was 2 a.m. and a bunch of people were drunk at his house and they wanted something to laugh at, right?
hmm
But yeah, you just kind of started out with the promotions in the area where I trained out of, and branched out slowly, from Minnesota to Wisconsin to Illinois, and then like one of the big breaks was going to work for Ian Rotten, which he still owes me money with everybody else in the industry. Um, but that was it. It was this kind of natural progression of expanding your radius and making new connections, and those connections led to the next booking, which led to the next booking. And it was about 4 years of doing that until I went did the Super 8 tournament on the East Coast. And I remember, like, yeah, we're gonna fly in, we're gonna put you in a hotel, we're gonna give you like three figures. Holy cow, I made it. And then, with that, I had been driving and doing some different camps and seminars, and one of those was the Dr. Tom Pritchard seminar, and at the time he was head of talent relations for WWE. That led to get some dark matches or some extra work. Just kind of kept opening doors, and then obviously Ring of Honor opportunity opened up, and I jumped at that. And Final Battle 2004, defeating Samoa Joe for the title was really what kind of put me on the map on a national level.
How was your journey to Ring of Honor, and how did Ring of Honor get to know who you were? Because especially back then, like that is where you wanted to be, like that East Coast Ring of Honor.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, I remember a buddy of mine who I trained with quite a bit. We were always the first guys there, and really working together. And he sent me this press release about this new company called Ring of Honor. And I was reading what it was about, and I remember I sent him back a message. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not ready yet, because I was always like, that was always like they wanted me to have my first match. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I always wanted to feel like I was prepared for the opportunity. And but yeah, I had a chance to hop in a van and drive out to a do or die opportunity at I think it was in New Jersey. Um, and yeah, unloaded every move I had in my arsenal because I thought that's what would get me hired. And lo and behold, it did. And so once Gabe Sapolsky expressed interest in using me on a regular basis, I told him I'd make it easy, and I packed my bags and I moved out to the East Coast, and just to make myself accessible. And that's something I kind of preach to young men and women who are trying to make this is, you go to where the action is. You don't wait for the action to come to you.
Mhm.
And, I've moved 20 plus times in my life at this point, always kind of trying to make myself available for whatever opportunities that existed.
It seems like, especially back then, like everybody did that, and it's not so much anymore. It's kind of, it seems like it's hard to get that mentality in people's heads that you have to go to them. They don't necessarily come to you.
Yeah, I think, well, nowadays, again, with social media, we think we just put a post up on
Hmm.
whatever platform we're on, and then that somehow is going to get the opportunities to knock on our door. And in some ways it does, but back then you really, because from a business standpoint, it's dollars and cents. So when you start factoring in a flight and a hotel and all these things, that could be the difference between you having regular work for a promotion or only getting to work there once in a while when the promoter can afford to pay those extra accommodations.
Hmm.
So I just, I knew that's a place that I wanted to wrestle. I knew that that was a place I could really learn because now I was getting in the ring with guys who were better than me that I was now having to, test myself against and learn and grow with. And so I just said, for a man that didn't really have any baggage or wasn't tied to any place specifically, let me just make it easy and let me come out there and so that I can be around the action. And the East Coast, with so many different, cities in that 5 hour radius,
Hmm.
there's just so much more opportunity than there was for me in Minnesota or Wisconsin, which is much more spread out.
Hmm. During those early years of Ring of Honor, where you were finding, who you were and building your name up, how was all that experience growing Austin Aries?
It was exciting. There was there was an excitement to what we were all kind of collectively building.
Hmm.
We were kind of ushering in a new style, which was really just kind of a ripoff of the Super Juniors that we were all watching in Japan, but people hadn't seen it over here yet. And you know, I go back and look at some of the old footage now, and I realize how green we were, but we were all just kind of figuring it out together, and we all had a lot of passion. And we went out there every night to leave it all in the ring, and the fans, you know, they shared that passion with us, which is what made it special. And so, I think we're going to look back at, we look back finally at ECW and kind of how that changed the industry. And I think now that we're 20 plus years past Ring of Honor's inception, we're seeing the impact that that's had on the current style of wrestling, and all the guys that have gone on to be major pillars of this industry all cut their teeth in Ring of Honor.
Hmm. Is there any moments that stand out particular more to you than others?
Um, I mean, obviously, the final battle Samoa Joe match is iconic for so many reasons, but for me, it was just this immense opportunity that, in retrospect, could have gone to any number of a dozen guys who were all qualified, who were all just as good, if not better than me. So, that's where the luck comes into this industry. You know, um, you know, going up to the hotel room and Brian Danielson telling me he had this crazy idea that he wants to do 3 1 hour draws in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And I'm like, cool, man, I'm game. Like, let's do it. It's that kind of like ignorance is bliss. We're too young to know any better. Um, just all these moments of feeling like you're being tested or given an opportunity to like take that next step and feeling like you accomplished that, and then getting in there with guys that you were like, man, like I want to be as good as that guy someday,
Mhm.
or even bring guys like Jerry Linen, who broke out of the Minnesota area, who I had so much respect for, you know, coming in and getting to learn from him, or bringing in a Ricky Steamboat, and getting to pick his brain, even a guy like Jim Cornette coming in all of his experience, now starting to really learn from these guys that had come before me. And so it was just a special time. And I thought that, Ring of Honor wasn't the biggest company in the world. It didn't have the biggest payroll, but they tried their best to do it the best they could with the resources they had. And that word of mouth spread amongst the talent, and it's why everybody wanted to be there.
Mhm. I don't know. When you first started working with TNA, was that when Ring of Honor was working with TNA?
Yeah, it was a weird time. You know, we weren't exclusive with Ring of Honor. There weren't like really exclusive contracts. TNA was utilizing guys that worked for both. Then there was some issues that happened to where then TNA felt like they wanted to protect their talent, and so this is my first taste of the politics of pro wrestling, which luckily up to that point I'd kind of kept myself out of, and also a glimpse of what the corporate side of pro wrestling can adjustment for me,
Mhm.
and obviously it was a learning experience. And I made some missteps along the way trying to navigate that, but I did the best I could. And one thing for me is I'm extremely loyal, and I think that the word integrity for me is very important. And I felt a lot of times that there wasn't a lot of integrity in how companies were doing business, and I pushed back against that, and as such, got labeled as hard to work with or having an attitude problem. And in my experience, as people who don't toe those lines and ask too many questions, yeah, sometimes they can be hard to work with and get labeled as such.
Mhm. During that first run with TNA, how was TNA still finding their footing at that time? Like they were. It's got to be hard to be on TV and then like here you can book this talent, this talent. It just seems like it was a lot going on to try to build their
Yeah.
brand.
Well, I think one of the big differences was, in Ring of Honor, there was no size factor, didn't matter.
Mhm.
We didn't have weight divisions. It's the world championship. It's not the heavyweight championship. Guys of all sizes were mixing it up. And when I went to TNA, they had more of that WWE mentality of if you're a small guy, then you're an undercard guy.
Mhm.
Even though the X division put them on the map, they were always positioned as a little less than. And so coming in now and being kind of pigeonholed as an X division guy, it meant that they saw me as worth less than a lot of guys that I knew that I had been in the ring with or could compete with. And
Mhm.
again, I always use boxing or MMA as an example. Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor, never been heavyweights, but have
Mhm.
been, the top draw of pay-per-views throughout their career. Only in certain guys' views of wrestling have we always positioned guys that aren't heavyweights as less than.
Mhm.
And so I rejected that idea and that theory. And again, that caused a little bit of a ruffle of the feathers of some people, but it's what I felt and believed to be true.
Mhm.
And so there's you don't need there's no size requirements in being entertaining and good at what you do.
Mhm.
And so that was my first taste of, oh wow, I went from being a top guy here as a world champion, but now when I come to this promotion, they want to kind of pigeonhole me as an undercard guy or a novelty act, so to speak, because they look at their heavyweights as the top.
Mhm.
And again, I end up years later, I end up the heavyweight champion of that company, still weighing 180 pounds.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like I put on 40 pounds of muscle and now I was a true heavyweight. I've never been 200 pounds in my life, legitimately,
Mhm.
but I started building myself at 202 just for the perception of it, right? Because when I broke in, all wrestlers were 200 pounds. That's what I was told. My very
Mhm.
first match, one of the veterans in the locker room told me all wrestlers are 200 pounds. So I come out for I think it was my second or third match. I'm about 155 pounds soaking wet at this time. And they introduced me at 200 pounds, and I see the whole front row just start laughing. Like, this guy, 200 pounds, right? With cement boots on, he's got 200 pounds. But that was kind of the perception of what wrestling was at that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, I just interviewed Lindsay Dorado, and he said the same thing. He's like, when I tried to pitch stuff, they only saw me as the Lucha Lucha guy. They wouldn't venture out anywhere else. He was a Lucha Lucha, and that was it. They wouldn't take a
And there's
chance.
nothing wrong with that either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's really nothing wrong with that either. Something I've always prided myself on is I can fit any role you need me to fit. If you
Mhm.
want me to give you an X Division cruiserweight style match, I can do that. If you
Mhm.
want me to give you a main event style match, I know the difference of how those matches should be structured, how those matches should feel, right? And
Mhm.
and as such, I can do a little bit of both. Don't mind my neighbors; they just decided to mow their lawn right now. I got construction going on inside, and now I've got some lawn care outside. If it gets too noisy, I'll pop inside. If
Okay.
it's an issue, just let me know.
Okay. How was your return to Ring of Honor after your TNA stint?
Uh, Again, man, it was a really interesting time there. As far as hey, there we go. Look at that. Welcome to my living room. Um, there was it was an interesting time in navigating the politics of pro wrestling.
Mhm.
Um, being at TNA, being suspended a couple times for what they deemed a bad attitude, um, and then basically, without my knowledge, them going to Ring of Honor and offering Ring of Honor the opportunity to buy me out of my contract, and basically trade me to Ring of Honor. And this was all stuff that was supposed to be happening without my knowledge, which is an
Mhm.
independent contractor in retrospect, I find odd.
Mhm.
So um, I was just trying to navigate all these ups and downs and twists and turns the best I could with really not having experienced any of this up to that point in my career.
Mhm.
And you know, eventually I ended up back in Ring of Honor and had another run there and made the best of it as I could. And eventually my time there came to an end. And um, then we fast forward. I ended up in WWE for a bit, and then I ended up back with TNA. So it's just it's been a roller coaster ride, and I wouldn't change any of it.
Mhm.
I've learned a lot, and eventually it's all helped shape who I am today.
When your time came with WWE, how did that all start to come about?
I knew they had some interest in me in 2012 when I was the TNA champion and had
Mhm.
that run. Um, is it 12? Yeah, 12. And so just conversations, just reaching out. I was free and clear of any contractual obligations, and I think William Regal was my initial contact man, and they were starting their NXT brand up and trying to get some veterans that had some name you know, um, recognition that they could kind of help build that brand and work with some of the younger talent.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so the opportunity presented itself, and I jumped at it because it was the only thing I hadn't done in my career to that point.
Was that a
So,
bucket list for you?
not necessarily. I think I had reconciled at that point that it may never be in the cards because they
Mhm.
had told me no, probably a half dozen times at that point in my career, going back to 2004. I was I'm too small, then I'm too old, then
Mhm.
I'm too small, then I'm too old. And then when they hired me, I was as small and as old as I'd ever been. So again, things always change, right? Parameters always change, and so I always try to tell young talent too that you know the door is going to be shut in your face multiple times. You have to keep knocking, and eventually the door may open for you. But
Mhm.
if at the first no you decide to pack it in, you look, almost everyone who's ended up there was told no at some point
Mhm.
in the journey. So it's part of the process. And so it wasn't a bucket list, but I do know that in a lot of people's eyes, if you don't have those three letters on your resume, you haven't really made it.
Mhm.
And so it was nice to guess to prove those people wrong and have the opportunity to really test myself at the highest level.
Was there any initial plans for when you first got signed, like why they wanted to bring you in, and like when you got there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think they knew. It was really just to kind of help supplement the NXT brand. There was no talk of me being on the main roster.
Mhm.
The 205 Live concept hadn't really been developed yet. So it was really just to come in and help support the NXT brand, and um, and that's fine. I didn't need any guarantees or promises. I was happy for the opportunity, and through some twists and turns, I end up on commentary and end up at WrestleMania 33. And I don't think anyone had that earmarked for me.
Hmm.
I didn't have anybody in the back putting in good words for me. It just kind of organically happened.
Was there any moments that stand out more than others during your run in WWE?
I think one of the things that I really appreciated the most that I really never would have thought of before going there was my opportunity to do commentary.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to sit in the production truck for a couple weeks to kind of hear and learn how all that process works. The knowledge I got to learn from Michael Cole, and
Hmm.
he was so gracious in helping me as I was transitioning which was only going to be a part-time gig, and I was still a character, and there was a plan to utilize this role in commentary to springboard me into wrestling.
Hmm.
But I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun during that time, sitting in with those guys and building some camaraderie and learning that aspect of it and seeing how difficult it is and how much credit I think, especially Michael Cole, who's done this for so long, Corey Graves, who's done this for so long. It's not an easy job. There's a lot going on in that headset,
Hmm.
and to be as good as those guys are for as long as they've been doing it is a testament to their ability. It's not an easy job whatsoever, and they're very, very good at it.
Hmm. Is there anything that you didn't get to do that you wanted to do while you were there?
Um, yeah, I never really got to be Austin Aries.
Hmm.
I never got to be the heel Austin Aries that I think is where I have the most value. Um, I was kind of pigeonholed because of Neville was doing such an amazing job in his role that they needed a baby face against him. Um, but I really felt that if I would have been given an opportunity to be what I had been
Hmm.
all those years before I got there, that there was a lot more value to be had with me in that. Because ultimately, for me, being the heel, I always looked at it as that the more I can get under your skin and the more I can make you hate me, even to the point where you go, no, no, that guy's really an asshole. No, in real life, he's really an asshole. The more I can do that, when it's time for me to get what I have coming to me,
Hmm.
the adulation of the crowd is going to be that much higher. Because
Hmm.
ultimately, it's always about the good guy persevering in the end. So
Hmm.
the more dastardly I can be, the more I can make you really believe I'm a terrible human being, um, the higher I'm going to be able to take you when I finally get what I deserve. And
Hmm.
a lot of times in life, the bad guys win. The bad guys don't get what they deserve. And so this is a platform where I got to embody all the terrible things I saw in society, and I got to be that, knowing that in the end, I'm going to give them the satisfaction of
Hmm.
getting what I have come to me. And some
Hmm.
of my favorite moments in my career have been laying staring at the lights as I listened to the crowd beside themselves with joy because Austin Aries got what he deserved.
When your release came from WWE, was TNA always the next move, or is that just something that just kind of happened?
It just kind of happened. There was I was going through that time was very difficult for me, and I put on a good face and I said all the right things, but privately I was I was in a difficult place and managing it the best I could. And the way I managed it was to run away from it. And part of that was to dive into my wrestling. And 2018, I did over 250,000 miles in the air, traveling all over the world. Becoming the belt collector, which was just an organic thing. That wasn't like some plan I had, contrary to what some people may think. I got an idea. I'm going to win all the belts. Like, wait, what a great idea! Um, but I did. I was struggling with how to deal with all these things happening at once, and so I dove into wrestling and just kept myself distracted, and then eventually, TNA offered me the opportunity to come back there. So it wasn't something I had in my mind. I was kind of in self-preservation mode,
Hmm.
for a few years, and even once I got to TNA, I still was in self-preservation mode, and um, it took me a few years, and even after I left there, to really realize I had to deal with some things personally and get myself right, and so I went on that journey, and I'm better for it now today. Yeah.
Good. So life after TNA, WWE, how's everything been?
Things are great, man. You know, there was a moment where post Bound for Glory, and then the COVID um, comes into our lives, and things got really dark
Hmm.
for me, and had a lot of accusations and rumors and labels being thrown at me, and it weighed on me very much. And at a certain point, um, I decided that I needed something different. So I sold my house, and I went down to Mexico for a year, and I went to figure out who Daniel was, because Daniel had spent his whole adult life in this wrestling of this bubble of pro wrestling. That's not real.
Hmm.
It's an artificial bubble. And at 22, when you get into this bubble, I didn't really have a good sense of self. And now you start creating this character, and you start living in this bubble of pro wrestling. And um, through that journey, I don't think I ever really figured out who I was separate from that, outside of that bubble. And so I made it a point to remove myself from pro wrestling, pull myself out of that bubble for the first time in my life, and go and do some soul searching and figure out who Daniel was. And so for the course of that year being in Mexico, and exploring some plant medicine ceremonies, and meeting people completely outside the world of pro wrestling and figuring out who I was, and then extending that into a trip to India and really diving into my yoga practice and my spirituality.
Hmm.
Um, I found peace, and I don't think I really had much peace while I was in the pro wrestling bubble. And so with that, gained a new perspective of not only myself, but pro wrestling, the world, my role in it, and so yeah, today things are great. I'm in a good place. I'm not using substances that I was using for a long time as coping mechanisms that were just masking problems and not actually solving them. I'm much happier, and it's allowed me now, as I re-enter the world of wrestling, to do it with a different perspective, much
Hmm.
more at peace, much more comfortable in my own skin. And I think that that's going to allow me to put my best foot forward as I'm helping the next generation of talent try to achieve their goals.
What is next for Austin Aries now that you're re-entering?
Yeah. Again, I feel like I'm at this point in my life, in my career, where it's time for me to give back.
Hmm.
I've done everything I've wanted to do in the business. I've had great success. It's given me a wonderful life, and so now I'm focusing on helping younger talents be able to do the same thing. One thing I wish I would have had throughout my career was a good mentor,
Hmm.
somebody that I could have went and confided in to help me, maybe I say, navigate the minefield a little better without stepping on so many
Hmm.
explosives along the way. And so I'm committed to doing that. Um, I'm looking at creating an agency that will help guide younger wrestlers. There's no management in wrestling.
Hmm.
There's really no. If you look at pro sports, there's agents, there's managers in entertainment, in sports, to help guide people to where they're trying to go.
Hmm.
And that's something I think is missing in pro wrestling. So it's been something I've been thinking about for a number of years. I think the time's right. I think I'm in a good place for it. And so I've recently partnered up with a promotion to kind of help them as they start their journey in creating a pro wrestling company, and I can partner with them to lend my expertise and experience to help set them up for success. I've got a client now that I think has a lot of potential. He just needs some guidance on how to get where he's trying to go,
Hmm.
and I think I can offer that as well. And at this point, again, it's about helping others, and it's not about helping myself. And so that's kind of where my focus is at. So I'm excited. February 3rd in Crestview, Florida, the debut show for Pro Wrestling Resurrected will be taking place. I've partnered with the promoter to help get that off the ground. And yeah, and I'm still active taking bookings. Like I said, I'll be in Indiana this weekend. I'll be in British Columbia in a couple weeks. I'll be in Utah next month. And you know, I still like to get in the ring and do my thing. Still test myself, see where I'm at. But also now trying to focus a little more on behind the scenes and how I can be an asset there as well.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Well, the old adage is don't. But I think that um, I feel like respect the art of pro wrestling, but don't take this so seriously.
Mhm.
When I say this, I mean life. All this, when you really think about it, is pretty silly.
Mhm.
All the natural beauty and resources that God has given us on this planet, and the structure that we've come up with a 9 to 5 grind and stress and division and anger, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so, in my experiences, is what it tells me is this is all just silly right now. And so we hold all these things to be um, the most important things in the world, and they're just not. And once we can do that, we start to be lighter, to feel a little more free, and not take everything so serious and so heavy. And I know for a lot of my career, I see the difference now is for most of my career up until recently, pro wrestling was my everything. It
Mhm.
was everything. And now it's just a part of who I am. It's a part of what I do. It's not everything. It's not the most important thing. And so with that, you don't take it so seriously, and you don't get emotionally so wound up and tied up in this thing. And you just get to float through life a little easier, keep a smile on your face, go through life with humor and with love.
What do you want Austin Aries' legacy to be?
Oh man, it's funny. I've actually thought about retiring the Austin Aries character,
Mhm.
because I don't identify with that character much
Mhm.
anymore. Um, I think for a lot of it, I channeled the negative that I saw in the world. I maybe channeled the negative that was within myself, and I I amplified that to be the best bad guy I could be.
Mhm.
If I'm going to be a bad guy, I'm going to be the best bad guy I can be, even if it means fooling people into thinking that I'm really a terrible human being behind the scenes.
Mhm.
Um, if I want anything, if I want fans to have any thoughts of me, it was that I was very dedicated to my craft of being the best I could be at whatever I was doing. Very, very competitive, and always wanted to do everything I did at 100%, to give the best show I could, to make it as believable as I could. Sometimes to a fault, and I'm man enough to admit that. Um, but I always prided myself on that. That nobody was gonna care more than me and try harder than me. And now I still hold those things. My focus has shifted a little bit, and so I'm still gonna try to be the best I can be at whatever I'm doing.
Mhm.
Um, but in a little bit of a different way.
Good. Where can people reach out to you at?
I'm still active on my Instagram, Austin Healy Aries. I'm on Twitter once in a while, but I find that to be a very divisive tool. But that's at Austin Aries. Um, you can reach me via email at theaustinaries@gmail.com if you have any booking inquiries or anything of that sort. And I think that's about it.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on today. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do, sir. It's been an honor taking some of
I
your time
appreciate
up
it.
today.
Thank you so much.
If I can ever do anything to help, please let me know.
Well, let's see what quotes get cherry picked from this interview, put across all the news cycles. Did I say anything incriminating? We'll find out. We'll find out in a few days.